Let's get things started with three thoughts from Kliff Kingsbury, who spoke today for the first time in a couple of weeks, trying to get his offense back on track after his two toughest tests of the season.
Number one.
The offensive execution obviously has not been as sharp against Pittsburgh and against Philadelphia. That is hard against good opponents. So is that kind of what has happened here? Has it been the good opponents? Has it been other factors, lack of practice? Kingsbury on the diagnosis.
In what regard? Obviously, the Thursday night game was not our best. But like when you just overall execution, you say? Yeah, I think there's a lot of things. Played two really good defenses, first off, and then just having the ability to be on the practice field, to continue to get reps together and build. I think this is the first week we've been able to do that consistently as a unit, put in a full week, and so hopefully that pays off. But, still had a chance in the fourth quarter. Our guys battled even when we weren't playing our best, which I appreciated, but just nailing the details, calling better plays. I mean, overall, collectively as an offense, we can be better. And I think a week of real practice will help that.
A lot of the stuff that they are in need of improving is stuff that practice helps a lot with. Timing, precision, just being certain of certain things, as opposed to that split second, half second, quarter second of hesitation that can make all the difference in the NFL. Decisiveness. And so I do think getting back in the practice field, having a regular routine and rhythm is really important. That said, there are a lot of questions starting to swirl, and we've certainly asked them as well, about Kliff Kingsbury's history of regressing in the second half of the season. Production just doesn't match back half compared to first half. Let's just say Kliff is not buying that as a thing.
I would have to see the what you're talking about historically, like the references, but yeah, I don't have any plans to do anything to break that trend that I know of. Yeah, I mean, I would have to see what years you're talking about. So I was thinking about doing triple option. Like, is that what you're thinking? Like, I don't know. Like, yeah, we're gonna do what we do. So.
I think it's kind of a funny thing. The damning answer there, the one that's going to sound really bad in 3 weeks if they've continued to struggle is, well, I'm not doing anything to change that. And it's like, well, you should, but if you don't know if he is not aware of the trend, which I kind of doubt, although Kliff went to Thailand after Arizona. Maybe he's not aware of media narratives at all. He really is not tuned in. And if so, God bless him. But I do think that they will find continual ways to self-scout. And he's talked about this in previous press conferences at center. Like, we got to self-scout. We got to make sure that we're, not being too predictable. And in that way, they just have to keep doing what they've been doing. Find ways to use some of the previous tendencies to set up something else. And they've done a good job of that this year. It's just got to last 17 weeks because that is what the NFL is.
Number two.
Obviously, Jayden Daniels' performance in the spotlight as well. Why has he been missing some of these passes? Why hasn't he been able to run quite as much? Back to the practice thing, Kliff?
Yeah, I think you just take it for what it is on both accounts. The passing game has got to be precise, and you got to be out there going full speed with your receivers to nail it. And then you're playing against two good defenses that make it a challenge, even if you are full speed, even if you're on point with everything. So I think you take both into account and you just focus on what you feel you can do to get better. You don't buy into one or the other too much and say, oh, it was this scheme or it was just that we didn't practice. You say, how do we get better when we do get a chance to practice?
I think another interesting answer from Kliff earlier, he was asked about the injury stuff, and he's like, I'm not going to divulge whether we change play calling, yada, yada, yada. And it's like, oh, so you probably did on some level. And I wonder to what and like what the gradient was, because we know from Dan Quinn that they definitely took some stuff off the table in the Chicago game when he all of a sudden came back. It's like, wait, he's not going to play this week, right? He's not going to play. Oh, he's playing. But they did not have the full playbook available. And then after that, they were like, no, everything's better. Okay. Well, the running stats have not been quite as good. So what's going on there? Is that a different approach? Is that something from Kliff? Is it something from the play calling? Is it something Jayden is just like trying to be more dedicated to sticking in the pocket? So all that stuff I think is interesting. But I think The bigger question now is they've come off this mini bye. He's seen Philadelphia. He's seen Pittsburgh. Is like, what's up with Jayden's confidence? Is this a guy that all of a sudden has been shaken at all? Is anything different? Did perhaps whatever Kliff doesn't want to divulge is that change his confidence in any way? And Kliff Kingsbury, I think very much is gonna say no to that.
No, he's pretty much who he is. I mean, he's competitive as all get out, and like I said, for him to put us in that position in the fourth quarter in both games to even have a chance to win, I thought was really impressive. And he's very tough and very competitive, and I know he earned a lot of respect from his teammates just by battling the last few weeks.
He's battled. Now he's got to go out and play, and we'll see what he does against the Cowboys.
Number 3.
Most important thing on the scouting report against the Cowboys. Number 11, Micah Parsons. A absolute game wrecker of a player. And that is obviously something Kliff has dealt with some other guys this year, but what is the challenge of Parsons in particular?
Yeah, Mike is a game wrecker. He's one of those, I thought Jalen Carter had a tremendous game against us. He was awesome and put us behind the chains several times. And Mike is the guy who can do the same thing. And if you don't have a plan for him every snap, it takes one snap for him to take the ball away. And all of a sudden, it can be a long day. So he's a guy you got to have a plan for. He's dynamic, plays hard. And, he's one of the handful of guys in the league that can really change a game by himself.
So here's the thing about Micah Parsons' 2024 edition, and especially for Kliff Kingsbury. One, no one knows Micah Parsons' game better than Dan Quinn. So I'd imagine there's some real conversations about, hey, he's going to try to do this. And this is both DQ to Kliff. This is probably DQ to Bobby Johnson. This is probably DQ sitting in O-line meetings this week going, hey, Andrew Wiley, you're going to deal with Micah. Here's what he likes to do. I know because I taught him how to do it. And this is the way that he thinks about rushing. And so that is definitely an advantage for Washington to have that knowledge because Dan knows Micah as well as anyone. And Joe knows him some, but Joe's focused on the defensive side of the ball. Like Dan being the head coach and the guy who was the DC and a defensive line guy by trade. Plus you have a couple of the guys who were on the D-line staff in Dallas with Dan also around. So there's just a lot of institutional knowledge of Micah Parsons that is very, very helpful. So that's one thing. Two, what made Micah such a nightmare in the Quinn defenses was they moved him around in the same way that they have moved Frankie Louvu around this year. You've seen what it's done for Louvu. Louvu is not Parsons, but he has had one of the most, if not the most productive year of his career because he's constantly getting good matchups, one-on-ones with guards, with centers, with tackles, but like in specific situations that allows him to be a menace, and he's gotten sacks out of it. He's gotten pressures. He's caused problems for offenses. It's not how Mike Zimmer operates with Micah Parsons. Parsons is no longer a guy who's moving around getting matchups who, if we call a slide to one side in the huddle, we're not going to have to completely reconfigure our protection at the line of scrimmage because we can't even slide because Micah Parsons is lined up over the center. There's nowhere to slide. We're just screwed. Or we have to slide one way and hope that the guard and center can figure it out and that Parsons even rushes to that side in the first place. Because if you're trying to double him with the right guard and the center and he rushes to his right, which is the offensive left, well, now that right guard's not doing a whole lot. If he just attacks the left shoulder of the center, and the center's trying to slide over, right guard's trying to get over, now you got this big one-on-one for DeMarcus Lawrence, by the way, on the right tackle, like all kinds of problems. Michael Parsons lines up at left defensive end, which is over the right side of the offense, so he's going to be up against Andrew Wiley. And unlike last year, where Wiley would then be left on an island to die, they're just going to get chip help. And they don't have other players that scare you to the level that Tank Lawrence has in the past and some of the other guys, Dorrance Armstrong has in the past even. They don't have the supplementary rushers. Inside, they've got some guys that are good, but that this offensive line can handle. And that just makes the protection calls and everything a lot easier. And so, yes, can Micah Parsons wreck the game? Absolutely. Will Micah Parsons have some impactful play? Probably. He's Micah Parsons. But he's not as hard to deal with because they don't utilize him as well as years past. And that's not to say that Micah isn't the same player, but you are only as good as the opportunities that you only produce as much the opportunities you get, and he doesn't get the same opportunities. And by the way, because Dallas's run defense has been so horrendous, there's not as many obvious pass rush situations anyway.